Night fell over the peaceful town of Willowbrook, a place forgotten by time and isolated by the dense forests around it. Jessica, a young illustrator, had recently moved into an old mansion inherited from a distant relative. In search of inspiration for her new project, she found herself immersed in a solitude that, initially, seemed comforting. However, this feeling quickly turned into restlessness, as strange events began to disturb their nights. Unintelligible whispers and fleeting shadows filled the halls of the old house, sucking away his peace and planting seeds of fear in his mind. Trying to push away these thoughts, Jessica indulged in her illustrations, drawing compulsively at night. It was on one of these early mornings that he found an old diary hidden in a crack in the basement wall. It belonged to Samuel, a man who lived there in the 19th century and who narrated in its pages a series of macabre events related to obscure rituals. With each page turned, the feeling of being watched increased, and the illustration of a hooded figure appeared repeatedly in Jessica's drawings, as if her hand were guided by an invisible force. Determined to discover the truth, Jessica began to investigate the history of the mansion and the city. He discovered that Samuel was part of a secret cult dedicated to summoning entities from another world. The inhabitants of Willowbrook avoided talking about it, but the murmurs and suspicious looks confirmed their suspicions. The deeper it went, the more the paranormal phenomena intensified. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed without reason, and the cold took over the spaces, even at the height of summer. The tension grew and Jessica's sanity began to crumble. One night, determined to confront her fears, Jessica went down to the basement with the diary in hand. The stone walls seemed to pulse with a dark energy, and the hooded figure appeared before her, materializing out of the shadows. Samuel, or what was left of him, was there, trapped between the worlds, crying out for release. With a desperate effort, Jessica began to recite the words of a banishing ritual found in the diary, her voice echoing through the depths of the house. The shadows seemed to writhe and scream in agony, as a blinding light invaded the basement, dispelling the darkness. When the light disappeared, Jessica found herself alone again, the diary reduced to ashes. He felt a calm that he hadn't experienced in months, and the mansion, now lit by the rising sun, finally seemed free of his oppressive presence. Although scarred by the experience, Jessica was able to turn her fear into a powerful source of inspiration. Her illustrations, full of dark details and ethereal atmospheres, became famous, reflecting the struggle between light and darkness that she herself had experienced. Willowbrook, meanwhile, slowly returned to its peaceful state, its dark secrets buried as time passed. In a small American town, Martha, a young architect, was struggling to rebuild her life after a series of devastating events. Her 4-year marriage had ended painfully, and shortly after, she was fired from her dream job at a renowned architecture firm. With no prospects, Martha moved to a remote town, hoping to find some solace and perhaps a new beginning. However, the isolation of the new city quickly brought their deepest fears and insecurities to the surface. The town, called Redwood Hollow, had a dark history, something Martha only discovered after moving away. The people were friendly, but there was an atmosphere of secrecy and distrust hanging in the air. Martha found a small abandoned cottage on the outskirts of town and decided to renovate it, seeing it as an opportunity to use her skills while trying to get back on her feet. During the renovation, she found a padlocked basement, something that intrigued and disturbed her at the same time. Determined to find out what was there, she broke the lock and went down. In the basement, Martha found a collection of ancient artifacts and a diary from a former resident who talked about pagan rituals and encounters with evil entities. The diary's description of events was vivid and terrifying, speaking of an entity known as the Forest Watcher. According to the diary, this entity demanded sacrifices to maintain peace in the city. Martha, initially skeptical, began to hear whispers and see shadows around the cabin. These events left her distraught but determined to discover the truth. While exploring further, Martha befriended a young woman named Sarah, who seemed to know more about the town's history than she was willing to reveal. Sarah mentioned that several people had disappeared over the years, including her sister, and she believed the Forest Watcher was involved. The two decided to investigate together, going to places no one dared to go, including the old abandoned church in the forest, where many of the rituals described in the diary supposedly took place. One night, while exploring the church, they came across a group of villagers performing a ritual. Hiding, they heard conversations about a new sacrifice, which, coincidentally, was supposed to take place that same night. Martha and Sarah decided to intervene, but were discovered. A frantic chase through the forest ensued, and they ended up getting separated. Martha managed to hide, but Sarah was captured. Desperate, Martha ran back to the cabin, where she found an ancient symbol that, according to the diary, could banish the Forest Watcher. Armed with the symbol and renewed courage, Martha returned to the church. There, she interrupted the ritual at the crucial moment, using the symbol to repel the entity and save Sarah. The enraged entity attacked Martha, but she managed to escape with Sarah. The two fled to the city, where they found help. Authorities were called, and the cult was dismantled, revealing the truth about the disappearances. The Forest Watcher was a legend used by the cult's leaders to maintain control over the city, and the sacrifices were actually ritualistic murders to sustain their power. With Sarah's help, Martha exposed the culprits and began to rebuild her life, now free from the horrors of Redwood Hollow. She transformed the cottage into a new home, a symbol of her resilience and strength. Years later, the scars of the events were still present, but Martha had found peace and a new true friendship in Sarah. The two women have become symbols of resistance in the small town, which has finally begun to shake off its dark past and look toward a brighter future.